The following is a presentation of the St. Louis Chess Club. Players from 9 nations converge in St. Louis as USChessChamps.com presents the 2nd annual Summer Chess Classic.
Hello and welcome to the 2019 Summer Chess Classic. We are your hosts. My name is Caleb Denby and I'm joined by the wonderful chess grandmaster, author, commentator, Jesse Kraai. And it's an exciting year this year. We've got quite a number of extremely talented and strong up-and-coming players at this Summer Chess Classic. It's actually the strongest one I think we've ever had. And we can actually take a look at who we have playing today. Sure. Up in the Group A, we have quite a number of players. Sam Shankland, 2018 U.S. champion, is the top seed for the A group. He's followed closely by Gawin Jones, the #1 English player. And following him is the #1 Vietnamese player, actually, Le Quang Liem. And then we have David Howell. So actually, both the #1 and the #2 English players are here in St. Louis right now. After him is Jeffrey Zhang, who is a very talented junior player from the United States. Mm-hmm. And following him is Darius Swiertz. And yeah, and coming up next is Group B. We've got Sam Sevian, the #1 seed, another U.S. player. Igor Kovalenko. Following him is Grigory Oparin, Daniel Friedman, Surya Ganguly, and Hovhannes Gabuzian. And now for Group C. Got Dmitry Gordievsky, Arturs Naiksans, Christian Chirilla, Aram Hakobian, Elshan Muradiabadi, and rounding out Group C is Brandon Jacobson, who will actually be playing in the U.S. Junior Championships coming up pretty quickly after this tournament.
Right, yeah. Beautiful field.
Yeah. So now let's take a look at the format of this tournament, how these players are going to be playing against each other. So it's actually 3 6-player double round robins. So every player will play each other at least twice. Maybe more if there's a playoff, but the time control for the games is 90 minutes for the first 40 moves, and they get 30 minutes sudden death for the remainder of the game, with a 30-second increment from move 1. And the schedule of this tournament, it's gonna be pretty tough. There's only one rest day actually. So starting today is round 1, which started at 1 p.m. And the only rest day, I believe, comes on Sunday, the 23rd.
That's right. It's a totally brutal tournament. 10 rounds is a lot. It's going to be physically challenging, and I'm wishing the old guys in the field the best of luck. I know it's really hard to avoid the senior moments when, you know, you've got such a physically demanding schedule.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And thank you all for joining us here on YouTube. If you want to join us, you're welcome to chat live on the YouTube chat. We will be taking a look at that. Also, use the Twitter hashtag SummerChessClassic. And watch the games live on USChessChamps.com. With all of that in mind, let's just jump into the pairings for Group A, see what the games are like. We've got Gawin Jones playing against Jeffrey Zhang, Darius Swiertz against Le Quang Liem, and then our key matchup for the day is Sam Shankland versus GM David Howell. So Sam, of course, the #1 seed in this group, with the white pieces against David Howell. He's definitely going to have to try and get out to an early lead, I think, if he wants to kind of keep this tournament under control.
Right, and it's a pretty violent game as we stand. So yeah, let's talk about it. This situation is really tricky here for white. And I'm going to just let you guys look at this for a second, then we'll back it up a little bit. But Sam definitely is taking some chances in this position. Note, especially this rook is really hard. You know, the bishop is looking at the pawn that's coming this way. This guy can move at any point, and the knight, of course, can be annoying. So on Sam's side, what we can say is that if he somehow can consolidate this position without losing something, then he should be better, because the king on c8 is out of play and the rook on a8 is out of play. However, it is not an easy task here, and we're heading into time trouble too, so expect a think here from Sam while we're talking about the moves, and he's got to come up with something significant now. So let me go back a little bit. let's just show the opening. This is a very standard Berlin, and I was up there watching it. And actually, there's a funny moment where even on move 3, David Howell kind of thought about it here. And so clearly he had more than one thing he could do, but at the board decided to play into this system. And Shanklin played h3 here very quickly, and clearly had, let's call it the opening advantage, in that it seemed like he knew what he was doing. And I wanted to say here that I felt like, oh yeah, Shanklin kind of got what he wanted. Because the pawns are now active, and it's not going to be easy for the bishop, for any of black's pieces to get out. Of course, white has his own problems, and that's clear in these pieces over here.
Yeah, so long term, I guess black is just trying to not make too many weaknesses and find a way to get those pieces out, like use those bishops somehow?
Well, long term, it's especially this bishop. The
Right.
unopposed light square bishop that black is going to claim is going to save him. And it's going to be active enough to save him. So let's do a couple moves. Knight f3, I'm sure, was also possible, but knight e4, b6. A simple idea to give the king some space, but also to prepare c5 and bishop c6. The problem, though, is now c4, very good move. This dynamic is going to be happening in the game as it now stands, namely that when you play c5, you have to worry about knight c3, knight d5. But without playing c5, how are you going to play your bishop on e8? Black played h5. Now, for reasons I don't understand, Sam played king f2. This might all be the same, but just a human, it felt more human to play king g2, and maybe he just didn't want to be on the light squares in general. Now, black is going to try to be active, and we're going to have to say that he was successful in this. When I looked at this, I did not think it was going to be possible for black to be active, but let's look what he did. Knight g6, knight bc3, bishop e7, and you know, I haven't looked at this with a computer or anything, but I'm going to guess that Shanklin might regret this move here, where he calmly played the thematic b3. And maybe a move like king g3 or bishop e3, more natural moves, developing moves, might have been called for.
So, yeah, does he just not have enough time to play a move like b3 right now?
Well, let's look at what happens. So, bishop d7. And now black says, check to the miserable king, back. And the threat is very simple. It's to take, to play rook h3, and then to separate the king from the pawn. Okay? Now, maybe let's talk about it positionally here for a second. If white could just develop a little bit, his position would be amazing, absolutely amazing. But this tactic is a problem, and the first thing that Sam could have done here is he could have taken a draw with king g3, and then they would have gone back and forth. So now Sam decides, no, I'm going to go for it with knight f2, and the problem is that knight is kind of hokey there.
It's not the most natural square.
It's not the most natural square, and it's going to be the green light for black to get active, which is what Howell does instantly, where he snips and plays f5. And now it's a real uncomfortable situation for Shanklin, because if he takes, he liberates the bishop. And if he doesn't take, he gives up all chances of ever being better, because this pawn will be on a dark square, and these light squares will be amazing.
Wow.
Right? He could even play knight f8, e6, would be better for black. So he had to go for it. Bishop e2, and now c5 was a simple and cruel move.
Simple and cruel. So yeah, now that the knight's pins, you're not so worried about the d5 square.
Right. Now, long term, you still are going to have to worry about it, but here we're going to get to our situation right now. Rook d2, and now rook f8. Let me get rid of all those arrows. It looks like a football diagram. So, one key variation, I think, is what happens if I do the natural move, knight d5. And I think the problem, there might be more than one problem, but the thing I saw was snip, snip, and c6, and I didn't understand how white held the f4 pawn.
Yeah, I guess you really can't.
So if you can't do the move you want to do, there's going to be some drama. For example, if you ever move the knight this way, if black has nothing else, he always has this beautiful check. And let's just say the dream of the Berlin is to have that unopposed light square bishop and have it later in the game come out and be active, and that's definitely the fear now that Shankland is living with. Right?
It seems like the two pawns on the king's side just can't control all the squares, right? You'd love to, I don't know, play f5 and have that pawn, defended, but then you give up the e5 square and the g5 square, and you'd love to play g5 to get rid of that bishop, but then you give up the f5 square, and so g5 I guess is also losing the pawn here, but
right. And so Shankland, maybe it looks like he had to do it.
so he did play f5.
He did play f5, and I think there was actually a variety of moves that black could have done here.
Yeah, I was expecting something like knight e5.
Knight e5, and notice bishop g5 is also a move.
Wow, yeah.
Right, so there was all
looks
kinds of
very
worries
shady
here
to me.
for white. But knight h4, I have to say, it feels to me, now we're about to see what Howell's intention is here, but it feels to me that Howell really does need something special now, because both knight d5 and knight e4 are coming fast, and then your knight on h4 is stranded.
I had a very silly idea.
Sure, tell me your silly
What if I
idea.
play bishop e5? Check.
Okay, let's look at it. That's very nice. Bishop e5. Now, it looks like I kind of sort of have to take the thing.
So yeah, if you take and I play bishop f4,
Very nice. Very nice.
are you checkmated?
Maybe. That would be incredibly weird if that happened. And you know what? That just, you called it. You
Well,
called it.
it's
You
on the
were
board.
right. Yeah, it's on the board. Let me
My
get
goodness.
that. And I think what we're seeing is, okay, let's just put your move, bishop f4 is also on the board.
Okay.
So you're the champ today.
All right.
I don't see anything special here for Shankland.
I don't know how you can stop this.
Let's just
I
say
mean,
the
your rook is
obvious
attacked,
rook
there's-
takes its stalemate.
Yeah.
So you can obviously lose the exchange, but that's just totally lost.
Well, no, I mean, how do you even lose the exchange?
King h3.
King h3?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
You got me there. But yeah.
But I think that's just totally done.
So wow, all right. Well, a lot for Sam to think about. Do you want to take a look at what's going on in Group B?
Oh, he did play king h3, that poor guy.
Wow. All right. So
So,
King h3 kind of just admitting.
So let's just say this is a terrible thing when you're the top seed and you lose control of the game and because you went for it,
Yeah.
right? And let me just revisit that
Dangerous.
moment where it was king f3, bishop e7, and you could have just gone back to king g3, but instead Sam allowed his pieces to become discoordinated with knight f2, and then we got this hellacious position where I didn't know exactly what was going on, but I definitely was like, uh-oh.
Yeah, all of a sudden,
This is a
the
problem.
pieces are there. The
Oh, we got
bishops
a
are
problem.
open.
And let's so
Goodness.
in this position, I didn't know what he was supposed to do, but f5 meant this brilliant thing, and I'm just gonna you saw it. Check,
Yeah,
and you got to take bishop f4, and it's game over.
that's tough. So I don't see a way white really can even hold on here. I mean, you can play on down the exchange and try to use that f pawn, I guess. But-
Right. We'll come back to see if Sam miraculously escapes, but he's
Right.
going to need a little luck to do that.
So yeah, on to Group B now. Let's see what those pairings are like. We got Surya Ganguly playing against Igor Kovalenko, Grigory Oparin against Gabuzian. And then our key matchup for Group B is actually Sam Sevian, another youngster from the U.S., playing against Daniel Friedman. So let's take a look at that game and what's going on here.
Yeah, let's take it from the top. And one thing about this Petrov opening is in the last 10 years, it's evolved from this kind of theoretical struggle to this very double-edged struggle, which is less, to my mind, less theoretical, because in this position, black has so many different setups
Right.
that he can go for. White's setup is easy. He's going to move the bishop on c1, put the queen somewhere, castle long, and try to mate black.
Absolutely.
Right? That's what's going to go on. But black has so many different ways that I feel like, I'm sure for the very top players it's theoretical in the sense that they've scoped out a lot of the different plans. But while I was watching this game, it felt to me like both players were thinking pretty early. And so it's nice because it's a real chess game here.
All right.
h4, and already with h4, Sam is dreaming about planting something on g5, which he's going to say is not going to go away, because if you ever take me, I'm going to open the rook. And if the rook is developed, then I don't need to develop the bishop. It's developed where it is, right? Okay, rook e8. Black, I'm sure, had various moves here. Knight g5, h6, and here we go, f3.
F3. So yeah, just right away. Just you can't touch my knight. The h file is too important. But I don't think black was ever actually planning to take the knight, right? Maybe something like knight d5 here and trying to fight back on the dark squares.
Knight d5 won't work because of the brutalistic bishop
the check,
h7 and knight f7. But yeah, you probably are going to have to play h6 sometime anyway. And what you do is you kind of hold the threat of hg over white's head. So he at least has to worry about it. Here's a nice move, c5. Black wants counterplay, and he wants to deny bishop d4 in any later, like right now.
Right.
g4 according to plan, queen a5, and Sam thought forever. I was up there watching this, and he thought forever on this move. It was unclear to me. Maybe we'll get a chance to ask him what he was thinking about, because that seemed natural. And then b5. And this is what I'm talking about. There's another game we'll probably talk about today as well, with the Caro, and the Caro with the advanced variation has also turned incredibly violent. Like this, with you have opposite sides castling, and it is a pure mess. So, beautiful struggle.
This was a question I had.
Yeah.
So it seems like black decided, I want this bishop on f8, I want this knight on f6, and then I'm just going to start attacking. So how do you come across a setup like that when your opponent's kind of just starting to push their pawns on your king side? How do you decide this is the defensive setup I want?
Honestly, I think he was thinking about it. And you see it from the times. Both players, they just were like, I think it makes sense to put my bishop on f8.
Yeah, sure. It defends the dark squares.
Yeah, and this guy is a real problem, the bishop on c8. Doesn't know where to go. So we're going to wait with this one and this one to see how it shakes out on the queen side, right? So,
Sure.
for example, after knight e4, which is what happened, this will then be black's cue to put the bishop there. And now, hooray, hurrah, we get an endgame.
Wonderful.
The bishop on e4 is, of course, hitting the rook.
Mm-hmm.
And let's consider this last move for a second. Mortals would have probably played rook a b8, but the problem for black is that on cb, rook b5, there's bishop c6.
Disaster.
Now, you could have also played d5 here. That would have been a fully human approach. So rook a c8 has some interesting intentions of just saying, I think I'm going to be down a pawn. And after bishop d3, this is what happened. Bishop d3, c4. Black is making a nice claim that the pawn on b5 is insignificant. The bishop on f8 is going to come and touch all those loose dark squares. And the bishop on d3 is going to really ruin the coordination in the white's position. And here, for example, you want to play, if you play bishop e2, I assume, there's something like bishop g4 will probably happen to you.
Okay.
And if you play bishop f1, you're just pretty upset about life in general.
Yeah, is black just playing something like d4 and then c3 just immediately?
Maybe. He could just pat himself on the back, first of all, that he got the bishop to f1.
Okay.
And then, white is considering bishop f5 here. But the problem, of course, is not just the double pawns, but then, the rook will come down.
Right.
Also, Yeah, the rook is going to come down. And your move of d4 c3 is always, on
Kind of
a
looming.
thought too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what do you think here? Do you like this for black then, or is maybe
thought
that
it was-
extra pawn might be somewhat relevant, right? You can play a4 and try to hold on to it.
No, of course it's relevant, but it's not going to be relevant for a while.
Fair enough. Gotta weather the storm first. I guess.
White's the one who decides what kind of game we get.
Yeah.
I would say just intuitively that bishop e2 and bishop f1 are going to be fine for black. So let's consider bishop f5.
Okay.
Now, black probably has more than one move, but let's just say takes. And now again we have more than one move.
So yeah, I would be a little hesitant maybe to just play something like rook e2 when there are moves like f6 maybe for
Well,
white.
also we might have to worry a little bit about bishop c3.
That
right?
as well.
But, yeah. So, I mean, I assume bishop f5 is on the board, so that did happen.
All right. So yeah,
That
this
was
is-
kind of a process of elimination kind of thing, because the
Yeah.
other ones were so sad.
You almost have to do something.
Now, maybe we can try to divine his intentions here, because this was the moment where black decided with rook ac8, to do his plan, whereas he could have, unless I'm missing something, he could have picked up the pawn like that?
Yeah. You were saying d5
like
next,
here,
and then
snip, and then d5?
I would definitely agree that this is.
Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that his move is worse. It's just like he has some deeper intention with here, where he's saying I don't need the pawn, and I guess I'm going to be doing something with the c pawn.
Yeah, there's like just some uncomfortable pressure where if the dark squared bishop ever lifts itself up, c3 can kind of come, and
I have to say I don't get it yet.
Yeah,
Let's
okay.
say okay. Let's try to imagine it for black. So. Basically, as white, what I'm thinking is, if whenever you do d4, whether you take on f5 first or not, there's something like bishop e1 to f2.
yeah, a little pressure there as well. But I mean, there's already going to be pressure on the d pawn if takes occurs on f5, right? You have to like takes on f5, and then the d pawn is kind of already loose.
Well, yeah, but so what do we do?
I mean, can you let the bishop sit, maybe? I don't know. I honestly,
This is the threat.
I couldn't tell you.
Right? I feel like that's the clear positional threat.
I feel like I want to play rook b8 and then take my pawn back to b5.
But now we know he doesn't want to do that.
Yeah.
He doesn't want to do that. If he does, he'll be upset with himself.
Well, Daniel's got different intentions somehow.
Well, let's look at this again. Bishop takes, pawn takes. I'll get rid of this arrow. And then the question is, what can black do?
I just think there's so many good moves for white. White wants to play f6, white wants to play bishop c3, white wants to play rook g1, and
Let's say I just don't care. This is a kind of an ugly move, but let's say I
Don't
don't care.
I'll start with f6, I guess.
All right, so we'll take the thing.
I want to check you with my h rook, preferably.
Okay.
Okay. There's nothing immediate, I guess. My f pawn's going to be weak, right? On bishop c3, you're planning, I guess, rook f5.
I mean, honestly, I just want to say this does not look aesthetically appealing to me to play rook e5.
Yeah.
But I'm just trying to figure out what his intention was. There could be also an intention. The other hint to me that rook e5 is his intention is that now bishop f4 doesn't skewer my business.
Ah, okay. So yeah, seeing the tactics, the patterns beforehand, and giving himself that extra option, maybe.
He's definitely thinking about it.
Well, I guess let's give him some time to consider that and check out maybe Group C.
Sure,
So
let's
let's
look
see
at
what the
Group
pairings
C.
look like for that section. So we've got
yeah.
Brandon Jacobson versus Christian Chirilla, Arturs Nixons versus Elshan Muradabadi, and Gordievsky playing Aram Hakobian.
Yeah, and
So our key matchup for the day was actually, I guess, Gordievsky against Hakobian.
That wasn't my key at matchup.
Well, that's all right. So you wanted to look at Brandon Jacobson,
And
right?
in fact,
So maybe we'll jump over there instead.
I want to tell our crew that if we can get Brandon in here for an interview, I would love to talk to him about this game that he just played.
We'll get him down here. I think
Very
actually.
interesting game.
So of course their game has ended. Is what we're talking about here. So let's take a look and see how that game actually went. Maybe
it was really pretty interesting. I have to say, there were points of the game where I was mystified, and maybe Christian Chirilla, the Count, was also mystified. So I'm sure this was all very familiar to both players here. D5, okay. So White says, you can take my pawn, and then White says, I'm going to play H4.
Wow, okay.
And I felt this was probably, this is still the kid's theory, because he was playing it pretty quick. The kid. Anyone playing U.S. Junior is a kid. So this is definitely still theory, but.
So what's the idea with H4? Usually you see that with a rook, on H1, kind of supporting it, but he's just claiming some dark squares, or is he planning H5 to break down the king side?
Definitely planning H5, and as we see in the game, he has this naughty intention of playing rook B3 and over. And I have to say, like, one thing that's beautiful about this game is Black has several different defensive setups. I feel like he could now go for, right? The Count chooses very solid, what looked to me very solid, right? Knight D7, rook B3, bishop G7, and very brutal. Now let me just say this
straight to the point.
By the way, what'll be interesting to talk to Brandon about is what I couldn't figure out is I said to myself, yes, it's very clever that the rook gets to go to H3, but how do you get the queen over to like H4 or something? It was that part of it was very unclear to me.
I see.
Part of Black's problems, though, are just positional. One, it's hard for him to get counterplay by advancing these pawns. He's obviously up a pawn, and he would like to get play with those pawns. And it's also hard for this bishop to get in. At least he owes us a move or so for that bishop to do something.
Well, before we get too far into this attack, I think Brandon is actually ready to come in.
Great.
So I'm going to actually step out of the studio, and we'll get Brandon in here to give you his thoughts on the game.
All right. So I'm going to, while he's coming in, I'll just peek at a couple other games here. In Hakobian against Gordievsky, this has been interesting for a while, and I felt like White probably had a slight edge for some time here, but it's obviously a mess. Anything could happen there. Elshon played very provocatively, as he does, but I think he has a nice position against Arturas Nexans, whose name I'm probably butchering, but that's how I'm pronouncing it, with a nice attack on the D4 pawn. And a game I want to look at while we're waiting is Jeffrey Zhang's game. We haven't talked about it much. I did refer earlier to the Caro being a violent opening now because of this E5 variation. And I hope we can get the players in here too to talk about this game, because it was very, I felt it was very provocative the way Jeffrey played in this game, where his king is going to constantly be on the move. And maybe here was a moment right around here where Gawain might have been able to play more actively. All right, we have Brandon coming in the studio. A beautiful win. So we're going to get a chance to ask him some questions about what was going on. So, glad you're here. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah. Now, if you want, you could tell me to move, or you could just, take over the controls yourself, however you'd like to do it.
Okay, sure.
And let's start, let's say, with B6.
Yeah, so in the database, he's played this quite a number of times actually
Oh,
here.
okay.
So it was pretty predictable.
Yeah.
And I thought this pawn sack plan would be pretty dangerous.
Okay, good preparation. And he didn't really know about this, I'm going to get the feeling.
Yeah.
Now, Caleb said, well, usually when you play H4, there's a rook behind it.
That's true, yeah. But the idea is pretty simple, right? Eventually you're going to go h5, knight g5, try to bring your rook or queen to the h file. And
Right.
black's bishop on b7 is misplaced, and it's already really dangerous for black to try to defend here.
Right, and I guess there's my sense. One of the things that's impressive to me about this game is, I'm sure you kind of had some plans here, but there's a lot of different things black could try,
Yeah,
right?
there.
So you couldn't like map it out totally, right?
I mean, I was trying to, but I'm not really. I'm sure there are plenty of options for black here that I haven't considered. But
His plan looked, at least the first two moves looked fine, right?
yeah, queen d6, knight
Yeah.
d7. I think after rook b3 though, bishop f6 should be a better move. So the idea is that if I try to play take and then knight g5 like I did in the game, black has king g7 and then this rook h8 defense.
I see. Let's maybe point that out. So bishop f6 and knight g takes or knight g5, one of those.
Oh yeah, one of those.
Let's say knight g5. Well, knight g5 keeps the tension, then he can't do the king g7 business.
Well, if
so
knight g5 right away, maybe g takes to h5. I'm not too sure.
Yeah, that would take some cojones to
Yeah.
do that. That would be,
I mean, also maybe h6 here.
maybe that would also take. You know,
I know. Yeah.
you
Either
have
way, it's dangerous. For
Yeah, you
black,
have a very nice. That actually shows how dangerous this initiative is.
Yeah,
for
yeah.
you. Well, now one thing I want to ask you is, so I saw this position, okay, rook h3, and I was like, that was very creative what he just did, but I said to myself, how is the queen actually get over there? It seemed hard for the queen to get over.
I mean, the
there.
idea is as long as I'm stopping e6, it's kind of hard for black to move around. So I don't have to do
Right.
something immediate. I can try to build up e5 maybe with f4 at some point,
Mhm.
or later with rook h4, queen b3, queen h3. In some cases, even g3, king g2, bringing the rook to h1. The idea is if I'm just stopping black from breaking the center, then I have a lot of time to build up my position.
Maybe knight f6 wasn't the best try.
Yeah, I was considering going. He could play bishop f6 here, rook h3, king g7 anyway. It looks risky, but I can really find a follow up there
Maybe just c4.
for black here.
Yeah.
Yeah, something like that is logical too. Trying to.
Well, and maybe I don't understand his intention. Like, what is the idea of knight s6?
I mean, probably he just played that automatically, just trying to defend. And the idea of bishop c8 at some point, so to keep my pieces off the h file.
Good. I think we can see it in his next three moves, right? His intention is that when his bishop comes to c8, he will at least try to mess with your coordination a little bit.
Another thing is there in a lot of positions there's this idea of knight takes e4 or knight takes d5.
Uh-huh.
So if I have to trade queens, then he'll have 3 pawns for the piece, and it's still unclear. So
Okay, good.
I have to always be prepared for that.
So here. How confident were you here?
And after queen c2, I think my position's already pretty good here, because his idea is if I play something else, he'll go queen e5, either after bishop c8 or here.
Uh-huh.
But if queen e5 here, the idea of queen c2 is to sort of defend the queen side, because then f4, queen d4, bishop e3, he doesn't really have a follow-up there.
Right.
You can also throw in bishop c8 first, but then I'll have rook h4, queen e5, bishop f4. So
Huh.
he's sort of forced back here after queen c2.
Yeah, it's a fun position because I'm like, well, it's not exactly clear how you're going to mate him. Or maybe it was clear to you. It's clear to you how you were going to mate the guy here.
I mean, yeah, I didn't see any immediate. I didn't even know what my next move would be, but
Right.
I mean, it's sort of hard for black to, like, black still needs 3 moves, okay, a6, b5, c4, and even then what, right?
Even then, right, what are you going to do?
So,
Uh-huh. Okay, well, he tried e5. And now you really did the full dance with the queen to b3. So you're saying in this position you weren't certain, but then after e5,
yeah,
you saw the g3 square.
exactly, yeah.
Right.
So then I can try to break open with f4 like I did in the game, and then I think it's already really unpleasant for black.
Yeah, it's interesting where the extra pawn is totally meaningless,
Yep.
right? Totally meaningless. So f4, beautiful. Simple play.
Oh, yeah, c4 I think is just a blunder. You probably have to
Right.
try rook d8, and then there are a few different after queen g3, and there are a few things I can do. Probably queen h2 is interesting.
Okay, yeah, let's talk about it. So queen h2, and let's say I gave you another move. What's your idea?
So probably my next move is just bishop b2, simply putting more
Bishop
pressure.
b2, yeah.
You always have to watch out for ideas if the knight's not an f6, there's rook h8, so...
And this would be a good moment to say this knight would be better on f8,
Yeah, exactly.
right? Because on knight d7, there's this brutalistic thing here.
Yep.
Let's just show that. Okay, yeah, that's nice. A simple thing to say here is it's just really hard to say what black should do next.
Yeah, I know.
I'll tell you what though. I'll be the guinea pig and I'll say c4. I felt like you should have been doing that a long time ago.
Yeah, yeah. Probably should have taken the chance before. So let's say bishop, then queen c5, right? So maybe I should start with bishop b2 last move then, yeah, c4 is nice.
So
Instead of
on
queen
rook
h2.
d2, bishop b2 now.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. Now this entire time I was just like, give you the exchange if you want it.
Well, I still have bishop a3 now. My queen's on g3.
Oh, that's a bummer.
Yeah.
That's really a bummer. Well, right. So I would have to. Yeah, it's hard to say what I should do. Let's say this doesn't look right, but let's just do this.
Okay, so probably rook h takes.
Okay. And then that thing.
I mean, again, what's your next move, right? So
I'm just trying to survive.
yeah,
I'm just trying to, maybe rook 8 e7. Yeah. Okay, but no, beautiful position, beautiful win. Tell us about your life right now. What's going on? You're going to play U.S. Junior next month. Yeah. And how old are you?
I'm 15.
15. So you're still going to high school?
I'm in college, actually.
You're in college?
Yeah.
Oh, man. Where are you going to college?
Columbia.
That's very exciting. And how much time do you have for chess?
Well, this summer, I'm trying to play as much as I can before this semester starts. But
That's amazing. Okay, beautiful. Are you training with anybody, or how is it working?
like a chess coach? Or
Yeah.
I have lessons sometimes.
Okay.
So.
Well, I'm going to be back doing the commentary for the U.S. Junior, so hopefully I'll get another magnificent win like this, and then we'll get to talk to it again. All right, thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
So, beautiful victory by Brandon, and I hope to see him again soon. That was, I thought, a beautiful game. 26 moves, and it's already over. So, really nice. Let's take a look at Sam's game to see if there's any chance of survival. So, we got up here, and poor Sam. Let's check in on him. As expected, he is down the exchange, and Caleb, what's happening in this position?
Well, it's good to be back after that awesome interview with Brandon Jacobson. That was quite the game he had. But
Yeah.
what's going on here? So black has more rooks and more passed pawns, it looks like. But, I don't know. Am I miscounting? But white seems to have 2 knights for the rook all of a sudden.
Let's go back and see how this happened.
Something has happened
So,
here.
King, we decided when we left that black had just played this beautiful bishop f4, and it seemed on the surface of things that it was all over. Now, we should note that there is some counterplay and that at least this pawn is a subject of attack. So, knight ce4. Oh, okay. Rook d1. Interesting. So
there's some g5 at some point, trapping the bishop is...
right, and in order for the black king to move, he has to first play something like bishop c6. And when he does, then the f5 pawn no longer falls with check. So, hilariously, I don't know how hilarious to everybody, but to me it's a little hilarious, is that both Caleb and I saw this thing and we were like, oh no, this went
almost
south.
It's too pretty to be bad, but
Right.
maybe Sam saw further than anyone.
Well, I'm sure he missed it, but he's found at least a resource here where I don't know what's going on now.
This is not so easy.
King b7 and now rook d2.
And of course, of the minor pieces to have for a rook, 2 knights is really not the imbalance you would prefer, given your choice of any 2 minor pieces. But there's still, like, no joke. Maybe black is planning rook f8 here to try to...
Let's put rook
regain
f8 on the board to
imbalance.
see, because I don't... Obviously, that's the move you'd want to play. But I think the answer is quite simple, is that now... I don't think that's a good move, actually, because what Shanklin can say is, no, I have the dark square bishop, you have the light squares, and what that means is I own the dark squares, so you better not even mess with me.
Wow.
And so, one really interesting feature about endgames like this is that the opposite colored bishops change the nature of the struggle. And in particular now, the knight on f6 can't be moved, as far as I can tell.
So, in that line you're just showing, though, I
Yeah.
thought there was just bishop d7 check.
Let's look. King f5, bishop d7, king g6.
Ooh, well, you were talking about how you owned the dark squares. I was trying to own the light squares, but I guess bishop e6. I don't know. It's not doing what I want it to do, I guess.
You wanted to do
I want
something
your
fancy,
king.
I know.
I want your king out of there.
So, right, this remarkable situation where it's hard to imagine that black is in any trouble. However, I don't know. The knight on f6 is very strong. Yeah, really, really remarkable position. There have been a couple endgames recently where the guy who got slaughtered, like Shanklin did, survived because the opposite color bishops. And what it means is simply that no matter what the imbalance going forward, whether you're down the exchange or have the 2 knights like this for the rook, your bishop is the master of at least half the board.
Right.
And so black, you notice white's put all his pieces on dark squares except the king, though that might come soon to a dark square. And he can't touch us on any of those squares. And the bummer for black, too, is he has to be careful. If I get, say, this knight to a square like e5, things could get kind of scary.
Right. Maybe black should just try to activate the rooks a little bit more. Maybe something like rook g7 check.
Well, that's what he did. He played rook g7 check. And I think if I click on the board, I can get it. And I don't know really what the black plan here is, because white's got a simple plan. He wants to he's going to move the king somewhere and then look to put the knight. Now, here's a potential actually issue that Sam has to at least worry about is
Right.
if I do something like king f5, then there's rook g2.
So yeah, getting the rook in.
And more importantly than just getting the rook in, what black really wants in these positions is he wants to trade the rook, the white rook, for one of his rooks. And it's a very simple idea where black is going to say, my 2 rooks do the same kind of thing, and your rooks and knights do different things. So I want to take away that ability and
That
get
makes
rid of
sense.
my own redundancy.
So I know what I would always want as the black player here, and that's I have a passed pawn, and if I can't figure out what to do, I want to try to push it. But it's tough to get past h5, first of all.
Yeah, that guy's toast. In fact, you could argue that pawn is a hindrance more than anything else, because at least now, if I want to, I can put my king on the h file. Otherwise, it would be hard. Now, the fact of the matter is, black is going to get to g2, and that is a big bonus for him, because I think what it's going to mean is that the rook will get traded off. Right? Well, maybe I'm wrong about that, so let's check. So let's just say the natural king f5. Now, you can check me if you want. You might as well.
Sure.
I think I got to go there. Let's just
for
pretend
kicks.
I do, and then here. Is there any way that I can get out without trading my rooks? And maybe I'll just point something out. If knight e4, we can imagine a variation like this.
Yeah, this is like the worst case for white.
This would be black's dream, because here he has earnest chances to win. where this is a great position for the rook. There's no squares for white to sink his teeth into, and the rook will eventually find its way into the 7th rank. So that's the drama. Now, looks like king f4 was played. So let's click on that. And I'm expecting rook g2. But it might not. You might not even be in a rush to do it. Maybe you can come up with something else.
Yeah. So the big thing keeping black back here, in my opinion, is that the rook on a8 doesn't have any easy way into the game. So I was thinking maybe if black can find the time, you just come into f8 and then to f7, and you just follow the same path as the other rook. But it's really tough to find any other way to get that rook in the game.
Right. I think the guy should play rook g2 without thinking about it. Boom.
Yeah.
Let Shanklin try to find some way not to trade off all that business. I don't actually. It's a real bummer for him.
Yeah, this is move 37, I guess. So
Yeah,
they've got a
37.
few more moves to make before time control, but they are running a bit low.
And let's just say that in this very interesting position, maybe rook d2 was inaccurate. It's a difficult.
What would you like to see instead?
I just don't want that rook g2 to land on me, and then have to. Here's a thought, though. Here's a thought. Maybe Shanklin could think about it this way and say to himself, you know what? It's cool that you put your rook on g2, but I will try to say that I never have to move the knight.
Yeah, and that's...
Is it true? I don't know.
It might be.
Maybe that's what
Doesn't seem
Gawain's
unreasonable.
thinking about, like maybe king f5 now. Not totally clear what I'm doing, but I don't have to move the knight.
Yeah, the thing is, black never has to move the rook either, though.
No, of course. No.
So it seems as though my rook is keeping both your rook and your knight kind of from moving for a while at least.
And you know what? You were talking about that a8 rook. I'm sure something black is thinking about is a5.
Ah.
And if a4, then this pawn will be weak. Rook g2 was played. And I think this is a challenge for white to figure out a plan here. Yeah, very interesting position. One thing that I like about the Berlin a lot is, although I don't play it myself, is I can imagine studying it and getting some ideas, and you just have interesting chances in the endgame. And if you want to really kind of specialize in endgames, this would be a great opening,
Yeah,
so also
definitely.
just to learn endgames from, because you get these beautiful imbalances, like this bishop on c6, who's such a beautiful piece. And you get it a lot, so you would get common themes where you get to play again and again. Unfortunately, it's so popular that, like Shanklin is busting out, what was it, h3 early, and he clearly knew, he had it kind of mapped out, at least the first part of
He
it.
was ready for it.
Yeah. Let's look at Jeffrey's game. We'll come back.
That's one we haven't seen yet today, but I think it was a pretty intense... Oh, I guess you went over it briefly, but yeah, it
Just
looked
very
pretty
briefly.
intense, right?
And the thing I want to say about it is I thought it was very provocative the way Jeffrey played. Honestly, just to even allow this position these days, I feel is provocative because what white is getting, especially after you have to play h5, is yes, you are going to get a structure that's like the French, and your bishop will be outside the pawn chain, but you're going to owe white a tempo, and if you have to play h5, which nowadays they kind of do in an obligatory way, this square and then potentially later this square are going to be weakened. As a French player myself, I get real queasy when I
Right.
see that.
Fair enough.
So let's take a look at what happens here. So very clear play. The idea of queen a5 is eventually I'm going to play queen a6. And knight b3 is simple and beautiful, working against this c5 break. And this is the position that if I get Gawain in here later, or maybe I just go hang out later and get a chance to talk to him, but I felt like this was the moment where he needed to find a clearer plan.
Right.
Because the next 3 or so moves, I felt like he didn't, it didn't feel like he knew what he was doing. And but we should say, even if white does absolutely nothing here for the next couple moves, black's king will always be in danger, right? It's just like it doesn't know where it's going to go. It's going to be in danger. And so white's first two moves are kind of just like, I'm going to build the position and see what's going to happen. But I still didn't like them. I wanted to put a piece on rather in g5, and it'd be nice to organize some kind of something with a knight on b3. He eventually plays a4, a5, and that would certainly, I feel, be not a bad start to this position, to just play a4, a5. And to tell the black queen that not only going to crimp your style a little bit and the knight coming to b6, but I might play a6 if you ever move.
Yeah, this is something like I noticed about this variation is not only is your king kind of stuck in the center, but you've kind of sidelined your queen as well, which is one of the most useful defensive pieces. It's on a6, and it's going to take a few moves to get it back anywhere where it can help.
And this is the critical question. The interesting debate here, thing for black is he gets to decide when to play c5.
Mm-hmm.
And the second he does it, it's like the nature of the game completely shifts from a closed game to a violent game. And what Gawain does is he kind of continues to not do anything. He's just sitting. He's just sitting here. And the next couple moves, not so impressive, but he's just sitting on him. You get the feeling that he didn't quite know what to do. Now, bishop c5 I thought was an interesting move because you would expect knight c5, but the notion, I guess, is that if you take my bishop, this knight will land on this square.
So I know the big thing usually in this structure is if the bishop does get traded off, then stuff like the d6 square is always going to be a problem.
Sure.
I guess there's really no clear way to make use of that here. Or even the d4 square, I guess, is kind of being given up by trading off this bishop, but I don't know. I would much rather have that knight on e4, I think, than care about either of those things.
Right. So king g2, and I wasn't thrilled about this one, knight f8. By the way, a6 was a nice move too because it just said I'm going to wait, and I don't ever want you to play a6.
Right.
And I'm going to try to keep your pawns, when I say your, I mean white's pawns, on dark squares so that this bishop remains bad. And I say that's one of the key problems going forward for white, is that especially if you trade off this knight and you're just left poking around on the dark squares, and black's knight can start hopping in the light squares, that's the danger now for white in this position. Bishop e3, no trade. Knight e7, beautiful. So he's going to work, he's going to dance the light squares.
Yeah, he's already kind of achieved it, where he's just,
and
what
now
can this bishop attack if there's no pieces?
He could take and get that knight. I think the knight versus bishop is favorable. It's probably going to happen anyway, but this is fair. I like, I'll say this with Jeffrey, is we covered his games in the Fall Classic too here, and let's just say I was a spectator watching them. And he's played a lot of provocative chess, especially as black. Come attack me chess. And what was funny about this game is normally he plays the Sicilian, but he clearly intended to play this situation. He aimed for this kind of weird game. And it's like now the problem for white is if you don't take the opportunity to hurt black, something like this is going to happen where white is the one who has, I think, the danger, especially now on the light squares. Queen c8, g6, just taking our time, and now he finally castles. Isn't it nice? You're on move 28, and then you castle.
It's time.
Now, we're playing a game here where white is claiming that if I ever take on d4, that black isn't going to have enough. I guess that's the claim.
Yeah, you definitely prefer black here, right? I
Oh,
don't
yeah.
see how you can
Yeah.
go any other way with it.
But he got rid of his bishop, and that was a good thing.
So I guess that was the point of b4, was to allow this bishop c5 move, even though you're kind of making c3 weakness.
Right. So black is definitely still better. And let's just say something kind of obvious. When you've got the French structure and the pawn on e5, your job really is to crack black on the king side. Whether his king is there or not, you still want to crack him on the king side. And it's hard to see how that's achievable here, but I guarantee that Gawain is at least thinking about organizing some kind of g4. The bummer for him, though, is that the rook on a3 seems passive and out of play. And without that, you also, and of course you have to worry about the breakthrough on c3. So it still seems like even though black gifted white the exchange of the bishop, it came at the cost of this structural problem. And here we have this is beautiful. I love when we get to watch the players.
Is that queen f4, I guess?
Let's take a look. It looks like queen e3. Okay, wait a second.
So
queen
yeah,
f4.
Queen f4 played. That's an interesting move. See, I was going to ask this. Obviously, black wants all of his major pieces on the c file, but I wasn't sure which square he wanted to go with his knight. Looks like he chose c6.
Let's look at this, because we were talking and they played a couple moves. Rook b3, knight c6, queen e3. Now, it's just very simple and direct play. Just doing all this stuff. Queen f4, it honestly feels like we're just waiting now.
Yeah, it's interesting. I guess white didn't want to take on c6, and that would be a move that would kind of jump out to me, is because this knight on c6 is kind of attacking my e-pawn, and that makes me uncomfortable, and I didn't like it. But
well, he's trying to say that he has better defensive chances if we get you to take on d4.
I see.
Let's look at your suggestion, and I think the idea is that there's long term there's no hope.
Well, that's very bleak.
Right? Whereas here, at least if you take, my rook on b3 will get out.
I see.
Black has a number of good moves here. Let's stay here for a second. There's coming into deep time trouble. Knight d4 is,
Well, it's
let's
been
call
played.
it,
Yeah.
knight d4 happened, and I'm wondering if he's going to play f5 now.
Oof.
That's maybe too weird.
Looks a little strange. You would rather have the backwards g-pawn than the backwards f-pawn, I guess?
Well, I'm just saying, when you take, there was no rush to take on d4. This rook is now liberated. So we are going to have to worry a little bit more about the rook f3s of the world. The reason I actually don't like f5 is, I think that's probably bad. I'm going to say that's probably bad. But queen g5 is a little bit annoying.
Yeah, and then just the f6 square and the h6 square, and it's...
I still think this is very pleasant for black.
Yeah, I think I'd prefer it. The move that came to my mind was just queen e7.
Okay.
Hitting b4, and then clearing the way maybe just to invade with the rooks.
So let's say I do b5.
I guess this is the first move I should have checked.
So let's just think about it. So obviously, if you move the queen, you release the tension on a5.
So then, my next idea, I still want to pressure this b4 pawn, but maybe I should do it with queen d7, and then coming into b5.
That's a thought. Another thing you could dream about is b5, saying that if you take, I will get incredible pressure here and here.
D4 pressure. I was just always going to be wary of touching any pawns on the queen side, because I feel like if white can trade off one set of those pawns, and then I thought his chances to hold would kind of increase. But
Jeffrey did it the old school way.
The old school way. Open the file, invade on the file.
And let's just say something very basic about the French structure, is that often if pieces get traded off, it's white whose space advantage not only disappears because it's meaningless if there's no pieces, but he will be the one who has weaknesses. So if we look at, in particular at that d4 pawn and the b4 pawn, but especially the d4 pawn, it's simply a weakness that black doesn't have. So rook c3 might not be the best move, but it certainly is very unpleasant, because there's no risk for black, and the queen is going to come down soon to some kind of c3 or c2 square, depending on what white does. let's say the natural move for white would be something like rook e3. But then there's so many things you've got to worry about. In addition to takes, you've got to worry about rook c1, for example.
So, yeah, I mean, just thinking, if two more pieces get traded off and then like a rook or a queen lands on c4, you really can't defend both b4 and d4 at the same time.
No, it's grim.
It's
really grim.
this is I play the Caro-Kann, and this is what I want out of life. But
all right, I'll defend for this guy for a
Sure.
second here. So let's say rook b4, b1.
so I'll take on b3.
All right, so snip, snip.
And let's see, I want to play queen c2.
I gotta try counterplay.
Okay. See, I'll just play rook c7.
And I gotta try counterplay.
Okay, even more counterplay.
Well, that's my side of the board. It's like I gotta do something. Okay,
Yeah, it feels 10 moves too late, maybe. I guess moves are happening on the board.
but this is what white wants to do. So, it's, he eventually plays rook e3, and
So similar idea.
and this gives Jeffrey two nice choices. There's rook b3 and rook c1.
The rook c1 actually kind of jumps out as...
The problem with rook c1 is that you got to figure something out about that move.
Right.
You see why I wanted to play f5 earlier?
Yeah, I
right?
understand.
Yeah. So, probably I'm going to say just in the way he's been playing, rook b3 would be the most consonant with that.
Yeah, it's just simple. You take the rook off the board, you get closer to being able to pick off one of those two pawns.
This will be similar to our last variation if we do something like this.
So I was considering...
You see, I got to do this, right? Because you're gonna start taking all my pawns on the queen
yeah,
side
it's
anyway.
happening very soon. It
Yeah.
might be happening now. I wanted to take on g4 maybe and
Okay.
come in with queen e4.
I have drawing chances by taking
Yeah.
and playing rook e3.
So yeah, you take that pawn, and then my idea was I can play at some point my king up to h5, and then the pressure on hopefully the d pawn and the h pawn.
I might also go for it with queen g5.
Queen
No,
g5,
no,
they're
I'm not-
just
no, I'm not gonna go
rook
for it.
c3, right?
But yeah, something like that. White has to desperately try to get play. Rook c1 was played. Haha.
Rook
Rook
f3
c1
played,
was
I
played,
think.
and so we guessed that much. And okay, the problem I had here was I didn't know how you effectively buckle f7 down, and he goes for the passive rook f8.
Well, yeah, passive with that piece, but allowing something like queen c4 now is very, very
Yeah,
scary.
I think this is dangerous. Okay, so let's think about queen c4 does have a mate threat. Let's just put that out there.
So you have to play, I don't know, rook fd3, I guess. He's got 3 moves left. It's very, very touchy.
He would like to play g4, but it looks like it's okay. So g4 is an option. Queen d2 is the back it up option, but actually that just looks bad. Actually, let me just say this. My prejudice is that with the rook on f8, it's unclear to me how... it's not clear to me how you are going to break white with just 2 pieces.
Well, yeah, I want to play queen c4.
Let's say I
my
play
next move.
g4,
I'll play queen c4.
and then some piece to d3.
So even that one you're saying. So correct me if I'm wrong, but as black, I think I should always be taking on g4 rather than let you take on h5.
Okay, let's assume I gotta take that. And now at least I don't hit your rook anymore.
And what if I just take your pawn? Queen takes b4.
Okay, so here's the threat. Yeah. White is thinking about it right now, this move, whether he's going to play
not
g4
only,
or something
Not
like
only
that.
queen e1, but queen b1 as well, right? You can't really stop.
Queen b1 scares me a little less, but yeah, that's... g4 was played.
Wow,
Holy moly.
it's happening.
I mean, he has to. This has been his notion for, at the very beginning when you're playing against the French structure, you're going to have to try to crack black, or else it's just eventually all going to fall apart.
So yeah, H takes G on the board.
And I think that will transpose if he takes queen takes. Now, arguably, he doesn't have to. It seems like he has to. But
What else do you do, I guess?
Rook G3, or maybe even Rook D3. That could be clever.
Yeah, I think I'd rather wait to commit that rook before I
But
I
it's
go
just
to
a-
G3, G3, D3.
It's just like you need to have an answer to this. Though.
So yeah, maybe the other rook to D3. But then I was thinking, so no, rook F to D3 is,
You mean right here?
yeah, but then I was thinking there might be some clever way to play like rook B1.
Okay, but if I'm going to do that, why don't I just do it now? And then I'm also threatening H5. But notice, I can always, now this F5 is always coming.
Yeah, there's, oh wow, especially without the G pawn then.
Right.
Okay, so this would be quite interesting.
Okay, so the natural queen takes was played.
And so one more move to time control. Two
That's
for
right.
Jeffrey.
That's right. I thought your move, queen c4, is played. And black, this is a real bummer when you got 2 minutes left. But unfortunately, the good news is you only have one move to make. And
But what move is it? That's the bad news.
you've got so many different, there's different thoughts of maybe squirming with the king as well. They're probably all bad thoughts, but they're thoughts. For example, I don't want to do it, but there's like,
King H2? No, so he does play rook F D3. So this is his official try.
oh, you just saw rook FD3?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just
So we
trying
kind
to
of
block that queen.
we kind of predicted that, and I'm still upset with that rook on F8. Of course, H5 is still coming, so black needs a nice move here. He should be able to find something, but
So yeah, my strange idea was rook B1, but then I think I'm worried about rook B to C3.
yeah, I don't know. Yeah, you're also just trading off your one active piece.
Well, if rook takes B1, I thought I was going to be pretty happy with queen takes D3.
Let's see. Like, if nothing else, couldn't I do here, here, and then claim that I'm the one who's in charge?
Maybe you could claim that.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, maybe this is
Yeah.
nonsense.
No, it's a difficult
for it.
position that, with a rook on F8. Let me just say, let's just go back a second, and it felt like the rook C3 already. There was different things he could have done. This was like the old school. This is like how Wesley So likes to play.
Sure.
Just nice and easy. Rook C1 though.
Yeah, that wasn't my move of choice, especially committing to this rook F8 thing. I guess maybe Jeffrey calculated something kind of concrete, and he said rook F8, these two pieces are enough, but I guess we're not really seeing it yet.
Well, it's easy to miss something here, especially like, these rooks in this position are doing kind of this incredible defensive dance. But like I said, it's kind of to be expected when you put your rook on F8 that black's going to have something.
Yeah, so last move for Jeffrey, till the time control. He almost picks up the rook. Now, he's got the hand to the forehead. He's not sure.
A1.
Rook A1 is his
Okay,
choice.
rook A1.
All right.
So, obviously the guy wants to deliver some kind of mate with queen C1.
Somehow, some way, he's going to set up the first rank battery. But with this time control, I believe Group C is actually totally finished.
Totally finished.
So while they think about that, let's take a look and maybe see how those games ended up.
All right. So, we had Elshan drew. I thought he had a nice position. Oh, I don't like that he drew this final position, honestly. It feels to me like he's the one who still has some juice.
Yeah,
this.
with the knights against that bad bishop, it's feels like something. But
A little surprising that he did that. Maybe I'll talk to him later and ask what he thought. This game was kind of equalish the entire game. I'm sure mistakes were made on both sides, but that was an equalish game from the start. Let's just look at this position they started with. They had that thing from the very beginning. And
What a structure.
of course, we have Brandon's beautiful win. He's now leading Group C.
Yeah, by a clear half point.
You know, I'm intimidated by kids who are 16, 15, he said,
15.
about to become a GM.
In college.
Played this beautiful thing at Columbia.
Yeah, my goodness.
Come on. Go. You don't need to be here. Go back to Columbia. we don't need to be upstaged by these kids.
Go cure a disease. Invent some new technology.
That's right. Let's check out Samuel's game.
Sure. In
It got
Group
really
B, then.
exciting. It got really exciting.
So
Okay.
yeah, this was our key matchup, actually.
Holy
Group B.
moly. Let's go to where we left it, which was this incredible endgame, and we left it. Let me find this thing. C4, bishop f5. This is where we left it.
I
Check
believe
this
so.
move out. This is a hard position. I wasn't certain what was going on here. A6.
Of course. Got to get the Benko counterplay.
That's pretty nice, actually.
I don't understand it. So he's saying, what if just B takes A6?
He's saying that, I think the word Benko is a nice term because he's saying that my play on the queen side is going to be sufficient to hold you off. And it might be true.
Yeah. No, I
Where
guess it's almost the same structure.
Where it's surprising, though, is you're allowing the bishop to hang out on c3.
Yeah.
So at least it feels like white should be better here. Very much
Yeah.
so, in fact. Right?
There's definite pressure on the A pawn, though, right? Or I guess Rook B8 was played. I was expecting Rook A8 there at first glance.
And then there's just the question, what are you going to do after a3, right?
Yeah, I'll put the Rook back on B8.
Well, you know, he's going to play king c1 and walk it out.
Okay.
Bishop a3. Bishop c5. f4. f4 is a really interesting move that I'm not sure I understand.
The natural idea looks like G5, I guess. And then
So
trying to
you're
make
going to
something happen
take
on
on
the best
e6
squares.
and then play g5?
yeah.
Maybe even f5. I think maybe taking and then f5 is the plan because the rook on d1 is being stymied on d5.
Ah. That would make sense.
All right, but it's obviously really complicated. Check to the miserable pawn. a4. Going back. Check to the bishop. King a2. Oh, man. Haha. I believe in white's position mostly because his pieces are strong, not so much because of his pawn. And
Yeah, I guess black is really kind of all in on finding something against both like the king and this whole queen side here.
Boom. Boom. And I'm going to sacrifice a piece. Whoa, and that's how we get it.
All right. So this endgame.
Oh. Intuitively, white should at least have, I think, nothing to fear. One fear he could have is that he gets beat in a rook and bishop versus rook thing later. But honestly, the pawns are very promising, especially because the white king is there to shepherd
Right.
the pawns. So,
And so of course it's always harder to get past the dark squares with the dark squared bishop on the board, but he's already got c3, b4, kind of a5 whenever he wants it.
and it's hard for black to get counterplay on the king side. That would be great if, you know, if that pawn on g4 were stuck on g3 somehow. But it's pretty safe. And so this looks pleasant. I assume they're going to take a little break right now.
And take a moment to collect the thoughts.
Collect
That
the
makes
thoughts,
sense.
yeah. Let's look at the other games. This one has been opposite color madness for a while. I think that's going to be a draw now that the stuff is off. Let's just assume that's going to head to a draw.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Just no way to break through.
And then Ganguly, actually, I liked this game from a variety of perspectives. Like the game with Jeffrey against Howell, this game has been one where white has been pressing on the king's side for a very long time. And I don't know if you're familiar with this position. You said you were
I do play the Caro,
player?
yes.
So this is Fischer's old school idea.
Of course.
Where you get the Carlsbad structure.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that was a revelation to me here was that white can give black, you can say, okay, you can achieve all your dreams and you're allowed to take that bishop, the knight, excuse me, on f3, but that I'm not going to care that much.
Yeah.
And I'm still going to say, I'm playing for knight e5. I'm going to say that this knight is terrible. And so we get this nice maneuvering game now where I liked it for white because a simple plan of building up on the e file, and then we're going to start playing h4 and h5 stuff. And b4, you see this with reverse colors with the Queen's Gambit declined a lot.
Yeah.
We're just going to try to shut down the counterplay.
So, yeah. So I have seen this line quite a bit. And, to level with you, this line scares me a little bit. And so I actually go for a kingside thing. I play g6 and bishop g7. And then I actually like to play bishop f5 there and offer the trade of the bishops with bishop f5 and g takes f5. And that's kind of the setup I go for against this. But the straight Carlsbad has never really been appealing to me.
Right. No, it's a little scary. And the good news is at least black is getting a little play on the c-pawn. Yeah, look at that. It's very pleasant, though, the way white's just building things up.
Eyeing some squares.
A4, obviously a critical attempt. Oh, man, look at all that. And so it looks equal-ish. However, I think it's fair to say that the attack is still going to continue here. Yeah. This is the kind of thing where I can imagine the computer... In fact, the entire time, I know that the computer says black is simply fine. But on a practical level, it's really hard to avoid falling apart. And in addition to the king, the knight on d8, it was terrible on c6, and now it's terrible on d8.
It's gotten worse, I think. So, I don't know. It's hard to believe. Like, the white just seems to have kind of free reign over anywhere it wants to go, and I don't understand how black can be okay here, but...
And one question white's asking, obviously, is what's wrong with queen b1?
Yeah, I guess it's got to be f5 as a response, but...
But then knight e5, right?
It's a tough move to play, yeah.
White just instead plays knight e5 himself. I kind of like it, whether or not queen b1 was strong, just because on knight e5 we're saying that the queen has so many jobs here. It's messing with you here, messing with you here, and you got to worry about the back step as well.
Right.
Oh, let's try to do this thing where I touch it. I'm trying to do. Oh, how come it doesn't work for me now? Hold on. I want to touch it. Sometimes I can touch it and it shows me all the different squares that it goes to. That's not doing that.
That might be disabled in the settings.
That was the tech team back there. They didn't like me doing that.
Yeah.
Sometimes I really like the way it lights up the board with the queen in a late middle game position. So that looks very pleasant. Let's check in on Sam's amazing defense. Sam Shanklin, that is.
So yeah, he's still fighting hard, I guess.
And in the last move, knight d3, white has just announced he's ready to see the rooks traded.
All right.
Now, my initial response there was that black was definitely going to be happy if he got that trade.
As black, I think I'm very happy with the way this game's kind of gone. I've not only... Now I'm able to trade the rooks, but also my h-pawn did make it a little bit up the board. I can kind of get safely to h3, and then...
And let's just say that this whole thing, the very fact that white's alive, is surprising to both of us.
After that, yeah.
Let's just remember, this was our
like
thing, and it looked like the end of the game. And now we're here, where it is a big bonus for black that he gets to trade the rook. But white is not totally lost. White is not totally lost, and a lot of it has to do with the opposite color bishop. Let me take a moment here and explain something that I know I've taught a lot where this concept I know is hard for people. Imagine, well, I don't know how, but maybe I'll just make it as a joke. They talk a lot about diversity now and the value of diversity. And sometimes I don't know what they're talking about, like diversity of what, right? On the chessboard, there's times, though, where diversity is very important. And here, black is undiverse with the rooks, right? You don't have to necessarily think of it as a population being diverse. You could think of your portfolio being diverse. You don't want to be concentrated on the same business. And that's what the rooks are doing. They duplicate each other's function, whereas the white rook complements both the bishop and the knight. Now, sometimes you can have a rook and knight against two rooks, and here we have a rook and two minors against the two rooks. And in both cases, it's a big achievement for black to exchange it off. And what we'll see now is that because the white rook is gone, black's rook can dream of being the hero. He did take on d2, and white took back. Being the hero and invading to create really a second weakness, which is this guy over here. And that guy's going to come under a lot of stress. We can, obviously, if we put a rook here, it'll become under stress, and if we play a5, a4, it'll come under stress. So there it's doing the little bubbles. How come I didn't get bubbles before?
I couldn't tell you what the bubbles are about. But,
I didn't understand that. So h4 was played, and yeah, this is
black. It really feels like black's gotten what he wanted. I still don't see exactly the path in for the black rook. Maybe through f7 and then g7, but
I think here's a way to talk about it. Black has two weaknesses to probe white with. One is white has to worry about this pawn, and it will go to h3. That's a light square. Black owns the light squares. It is going to h3. Now, is it maybe possible for black to do or white to do a blockade on h2? Yes, but this is where the principle of two weaknesses comes in, and you've got to worry then about the rook coming in to talk to this guy. So it's going to be two things on opposite sides of the board that white has to worry about, and the knights, as we know, are not great at moving across the board.
right.
Right? The rook, this is really, by the way, a thing that people should know is like, a lot of times people's are, let me just speak for myself. When I was a kid, I was prejudiced for the two pieces against the rook, and where you see that a lot is in the opening or early middle game, the two minors will just devastate the rook because the rook doesn't have all this beautiful open space. But now we come to the later phase of the game, the rook is going to be an absolute beast, right? It can cover so much ground so quickly, and it's, yeah, this is a nightmare for Sam here. So even though he defended well, it looks like he's still going to be toast. But the game is not over.
It's not over. I agree.
He played knight f4, claiming that he can stop you from going h3, but honestly, I don't think it's ultimately going to happen. Okay, this is a tactical attempt, though, that white at least needs to pay attention to. There's two problems now for white to think about, knight e6 and knight g6. Okay, good move. So at least there's some practical questions now for...
So the move I want to play, I believe is... well, first of all, I might want to give a check on d8, and then after that, I think I want to play rook h8 if I can, and just say h3. I'm going to do it, and then I'm going to do h2, and then I'm going to do h1.
Okay, why are you giving me a check?
Because if your king runs to e2, then I think it might be a bit uncomfortably far away from the a pawn, and same thing with c2. It's just kind of centralized right now, I think.
He followed your idea, but I like what he did better. He just played rook h8.
Just rook h8, no check.
Because the king, it gave the king a chance to improve itself, because maybe you do want to be with a little closer.
Yeah, okay.
So let's think if Sam obviously needs some good tricks here. Now, I'll just play a move and see if I can make something happen. Let's try this one.
I want to play. I want to play
H3,
h3.
right?
I want to say I don't care. Okay, there's knight d8. I see.
So if rook h6, knight
I
d8.
think
Now
I think I can still do this though, right?
You might be able to still do this. Absolutely.
Maybe even just rook f2 in the final position. So king c8.
Yeah, king c8, knight c6, and over. Okay, good. let's try again. So knight f4, rook h8. Sam is contemplating this. Let's just say knight h3 is a moral failing. And we can push you away with bishop g2 at some point.
Even immediately.
Yeah. So, what to do? Could I do that annoying move? It doesn't look pleasant. I want to just say I don't like the look of it.
So I don't have time to play h3 because you have knight g3. So I'll play.
Well, your rook's attacked.
Well, yeah, but I wanted to play h3. You take my rook. I play h2, but then you have knight g3. Was what I was trying to say to stop the pawn.
Your rook d8 now might be pleasant
Yeah.
because now if king e3, I got to worry about that business. Let's just say knight 6 h5 is not a happy camper move. But I mean, it's obviously difficult to know what to do.
Yeah, I mean, there's also just rook h6 there, kind of renewing the threat of h3. I'm not seeing it. I'm really not seeing it. There's maybe knight g4 instead of knight h5. And then I'll just say there's really no score on the h file for you to call your own.
I mean, but yeah, I can do, well, I have a lot of scores. I got rook h7, for example. Rook d8's a thought, too.
Yeah. And then
This is sad.
is it time to play knight h3 and just kind of...
It's always going to be lost. If you're going to do a blockade, it's going to be on h2, right?
Yeah, so knight h2 as well is another idea.
And this would be submitting to abject terror.
Yeah.
Right.
This
is abject
This
terror.
is nightmarish.
Was that a pun with the knights? Because
It might have been. I apologize.
Okay, so that's fun. Now, let's just say if Sam somehow holds this will be obviously key in saving his tournament. One thing I also want to say, with just personal experience in playing these long tournaments, if you get a couple games that go the distance, your system will be wrecked. And thankfully, it's only one game a day, but imagine you get several days of 80-move games. Whew, man, you're just going to be wrecked. So, having Daro, Svirt's getting a draw in the first round, even though I'm sure he wanted more, he gets to go relax, and think about his next opponent. And Sam's just in suffering mode here.
It's definitely going to be a long day for Sam.
Let's take a look at
yeah.
Jeffrey's game, right?
See what he's been up to.
So we had the famous rook fd3. They got a little time to think about it. Rook a1, queen f4, queen c2, queen e3, and he's saying there's no way for you to talk to my back rank.
He's somehow got it all covered.
And Jeffrey is, of course, dreaming about bringing the other rook in, but h5 is coming.
So here's maybe an idea. What if I play king g7? Kind of use this h-pawn idea against you almost, with the idea of rook h8.
I'm sure he's thinking about it. And here, there's a couple thoughts. Queen g5 being one of them, I guess. But I don't know what else besides king g7. That rook on f8 has to get in. But so let's just backstep. So queen f4, queen c2, queen e3, and if king g7, let's say queen g5, you could also play queen f4. The drama was that you're letting me into that square.
Yeah, so, yeah.
And
it's just tough to cover all these squares for white.
But I think what white can hope for, though, is that even if you check me, I might at some point be able to run. And I'm hoping that
Old.
Well, black will also have grief.
Yeah.
Black will also have grief. But yeah, I think your move of king g7 is the big candidate move. I don't see anything else at least obvious that he could do.
So we're expecting, probably expecting Sam to fall then. And what do you think? Do you think Jeffrey's going to be able to pull this out in the long run, or does White have maybe enough defensive resources?
Depends a
here?
lot on this
Okay.
move with King G7.
Yeah.
You know? He could, honestly, I could see Jeffrey losing this too. I've seen these kinds of things. It's like the White initiative will become very fast if there's any kind of trick involved.
A little up in the air. Do you want to take another quick look at what's going on in the B group? And then-
Sure. Oh yeah, let's look at Samuel's game.
All right, the
So
pawns have rolled.
When we left it, it was about here, B4. Let's do a couple moves. Check to the miserable king, and then A5. So, very simple trick is that if you snip, I have this. And in general, I think also White wants to say that he'd like to keep his pawns on dark squares.
Right.
So that they don't become blockaded. If you played B5, it would be harder because he'll, stick a bishop on A5 or something like that.
Yeah.
So, King D5, Rook A6. I'm sure there was there's not other moves. You got to go to A6. And now White is thinking about something like C4. So Bishop
might be
F4
time for C4.
is trying to come from behind, right, with Bishop D2. So we have ourselves a technical position where it looks, though, that White should be, let's call it either better or winning.
You definitely picked the white pieces. I think a win's almost more likely than a draw here. It's, at least from my personal experience, the pawns always get through, one way or another.
Well, okay, but imagine if this bishop gets here.
They'll always get through. I can never hold them off.
Okay.
So maybe this
Well,
rook landed on A6 in anticipation of something like that. So you can play B5 and have that A pawn still defended.
Okay, why don't you play a couple moves?
So I wanted to start with C4. It's the most natural. And then maybe I'll play B5 here. And I just wanted to push straight on ahead with B6.
Now, I do have drawing thoughts now with Bishop A5.
Okay, the rook endgame.
I don't know if it's really a draw, but I have chances because my king is active and I can come over here. So, for example, snip, snip, and then rook, I don't know. Let's just either A6 or one of these squares, right?
Right. I can just play rook B7 maybe?
Either G6 or G5.
And what if I play rook F7 and try to be...
No, good. You should be thinking about stuff like that. But that's
Yeah, so this is
this would be
a whole nother story, but...
Well, I think this is the kind of thing we're going to be looking at,
Yeah.
and that White is considering with C4. He's trying to come up with a way to deny Black all counterplay.
Mm-hmm.
The good news for Black is the rook on A6 is at least a little bit funky, and the Black king has dreams of maybe counterplay with King E4 F3. For example, in this position where I took on A5, the king could also dream about doing something like this later, and maybe even that's too much because of C5. But these are the things that they're here they're thinking about.
Yeah, all right, and then there's the two other games in the B group.
Sure, let's take a look at
Just
Ganguly's
quickly,
game.
maybe. So
Queen B1 eventually was played.
Queen
Let's look.
is...
We had knight
trying to
E5,
invade.
rook A7, Queen F6. Black is holding on for dear life. My sense is
is
that
he?
it should be lost just
Yeah.
because the knight is so terrible, but White definitely still has to find the way through. It's almost like White's queen wants to be on both B8 and H7 at the same time, but unfortunately those are against the rules.
Yeah, there's like the G5 pawn is probably going to fall. I think that might be... What if I just play rook H5 and then knight F3?
That's a totally brutal way to play, yeah. That's very unpleasant of you. He gave a check on H7.
Yeah, maybe preventing something like even Queen G7 ideas.
We're going to pretend that King F8 is forced.
Say just rook H5. I don't see it. Very, very difficult for black, regardless.
Well, wait a second. Isn't there a dirty trick here? Can I do this? Check.
Goodness. Oh, goodness. That, yeah.
Now, I think he's thinking about it because maybe there's some... No, on F6 I got that one. Bam.
Yeah. There's still knight c6 there.
Still knight
Yeah,
C6. What am I even
it's
saying? Yeah.
disaster.
So that looks like the end of the world that,
That
White
looks-
is dreaming about
That looks
here.
game ending.
He's just thinking about...
So queen h8, I guess king e7, and then...
Oh, good move. King E7. But now we have a variety of nice things like even queen
Queen
G8.
G, yeah. Yeah, the 8th rank, it's too much. It's too much to give up. I guess queen G8, black might be hoping for rook A2.
Here's another brutal thing. Look at this. Snip, snip, rook H8, and then what do you do? Oh, I guess you could play knight B7.
Yeah.
It's not a very pleasant thing to do, but you can. No, you can play knight B7. Maybe you're going to live,
Not
so
pleasant at
let's
all,
not do
but-
that.
Okay, but it's too much. It's definitely just too much for black.
Let's look at what happened here. So it went
Rook
check,
H6.
and then rook H6. He has some notion here. Oh, which is that if queen G7, now queen H8.
Then queen H8. And this
Very
is
nice.
this is on the board?
Yep.
Yeah.
So we found the tactic, and he just found a cooler way of doing it with
Yeah,
rook H6.
there's still queen G8 maybe to
And now queen G8, there's queen F6, and it's
oh,
good knight.
okay. It's
right.
it's over. It's over for black here. So I think we're calling this one for Ganguly.
And I just want to go back a second and show people this Carlsbad structure. If you don't want to learn any kind of theory against the Caro, this is a beautiful thing to do. Even Caleb's system with playing G6, you still do the same thing. You just put all your pieces aiming from E5, claim that the knight on C6 is terrible, and say, later in the game, no matter what you do, even though it looks like it's not that big of a deal, I will waste you on the king side. That is my plan.
Your time will come.
Your time will come, yeah.
And then I think there's just one last game still in play with Grigori and playing against Gabuzian.
Oh, we're going to call that a draw.
Call it a draw.
Well-
Oh yeah, we've seen this.
Well, we still got Sam on the board, though. That's the big game, right?
Yeah.
Oh, we
but
got- oh,
we're-
you mean
we're
in-
nearing the end of our broadcast.
In round
so-
in the B tournament.
Yeah, last
yeah.
game going on in the B group. So I guess we'll take one last look at Sam Shankland and then maybe keep
Sure.
an eye on our standings and see what it looks like.
So we were looking at this position. It's hard to say what White should do. Knight G4.
Knight G4 is
Rook E8's very simple because now the knight on G4 can't move. The pawn on H3 is coming.
Yeah, it's
And-
very, very unpleasant.
you know-
There's even bishop F3 threats, right? Or bishop D7 threats, just to...
One nice thing too about this beautiful rook that we were talking about before is the white king doesn't know. He's all of the white pieces are stretched between the H pawn and the A2 pawn.
Yeah.
And the king especially is just like, oh, bro, I don't know where I'm supposed to go.
Guess we'll just hang out in the middle until
Yeah.
someone decides for me. But
And he can't cross the line. King E3, bishop D7, it's all over. So I guess that's nearing the end.
almost anything bishop D7. It's either you let the pawn through or...
It's such a bummer for Sam because, let me just say about this Berlin thing. First of all, other commentators, not me, other commentators, when they see the Berlin, they groan and be like, oh, it's just going to be another draw. I disagree. This thing is a beautiful, it's almost like it's its own game. Like some openings, you should call it the Berlin game or something like that because it has its own rules. And this one was definitely an example where black's pieces exploded and we get really great tactics like this one and then a great defensive try by Sam for king h3. It's not enough, but for a moment it was like, oh man, maybe he's going to survive this.
Finding a way out.
Yeah.
But, yeah, so in this final position, we really do expect, well, not final position, but we expect, black to kind of be able to pull this through. It's just too much for white. And
Right.
so maybe the top seed, quite possibly going down in the first round here. So it's going to be tough for him to
Right.
make that comeback.
And as we close here, I just want to remind people that keep keep watching this Jeffrey
Yeah.
game. I mean,
Keep following
the
along
Dwayne Jones
at
man.
uschesschamps.com. That's the place to check it all out. All the games are still going to be broadcast up there. And I believe we're going to take a quick look at maybe the standings in the C group.
Okay.
The A group and the B group, still a lot of games in progress. But this is finalized now. So Brandon Jacobson taking a half-point lead out of the first round with that wonderful win over Christian, and peaceful results in the other two games, despite maybe some chances there that
I thought
maybe
Elshon
Elshon
really
didn't-
had a
didn't
chance.
press enough.
Yeah.
And with that in mind, I think that's going to be it for us. You guys can join us here tomorrow, as well as pretty much every round here at 3:30 p.m. That's when we'll go on. The games all start at 1 p.m. As always, you're welcome to watch that on uschesschamps.com. You're welcome to follow along in the YouTube channel. And anything you want to add, Jesse, before we call it a day?
Beautiful games today. Very fighting. I'm looking forward to it tomorrow.
All right. Thank you for joining us.
This has been a presentation of the St. Louis Chess Club.